Hello there, kia ora. Look, I thought today we'd do something fun. And then I remembered this is a channel about politics and the current coalition government doesn't make it easy to have fun. Although it does make me laugh that Winston Peters is lambasting Rawiri Waititi for the spelling of the word rain, making it seem like Winnie is a stickler for spelling. It's got to be a word for a grammar authoritarian like that. But he's also conveniently forgetting that Winston is actually spelled on his birth certificate like it was written in the 1500s, with a Y instead of an I. Or that the party captured by conspiracy theorists who rage bait over culture war topics to harm minority groups is saying David Seymour shouldn't be caught up in blind ideology. And there's a terrible and sad irony in that line which seems to completely miss ye olde Weinstein. But it did give me an idea for today's video. I'm going to show you how to spot left and right wing framing in media presentation on social media, specifically Facebook, because almost 60% of Kiwis get their news from Facebook. So it is significant how news is presented there. Across social media platforms, there's always going to be updates happening to algorithms that mean that the way content is shared is given different priorities. And right now, the trend on Facebook is that a still image post with a link in the comments is going to generally net creators a wider audience and more engagement on platforms. And Facebook is still the most used social media platform in the world. It's the method used by right-wing private media outlets under the NZME banner and Radio New Zealand, although One News still just posts article links, and Stuff famously doesn't like Facebook. Which means that to grab audiences, news outlets use either dramatic images or a combo of images and text, and our monkey brain tends to see the image, then read the headline, then read the description if we're still curious about the topic. Now, the rule of thumb for picking the difference in framing is that right-wing media will generally frame content around individual choice and authority, while left-wing framing will be built around system structures and inequality. The right's going to talk deterrence and toughness, the left talks about root causes. Right-leaning media is going to push pro-business narratives, and the left is going to push pro-community ones, while right-framed media will have an authority figure as a hero, and left-framed media is going to have a community or social worker figure as a hero. That need for an authority figure for framing on the right is actually part of the reason why an AstroTurf group, one with links to some dodgy industries, gets prominence in a headline like this on a clearly biased right-wing media outlet. In reality, the views of the TPU are only important because the media keeps saying they are, and if the media stopped platforming them tomorrow, to be honest, there'd probably be no discernible difference in the lives of people immediately, and maybe a little bit less racism down the line. But we expect this framing from right-wing media. Those on the left know who is presenting it, and that there's this clear bias in place. Those on the right, for some reason, think it's centrist and can't work out why that might be a problem. But we have different expectations for two specific state-funded outlets, Radio New Zealand and TVNZ. There's a belief on the right that these outlets are left-wing, after a survey from the same people that the right keep platforming that would be powerless if they stopped, did a leading survey that found people considered their bias left-leaning in 2023, undertaken by a company that refused to meet industry guidelines on not creating leading questions in its polling, so they chose to leave the regulatory organisation so that they could continue doing what they were doing. Other research, like the AUT Annual Trust in Media Report and Radio New Zealand's own Audience Update reports, show audiences generally trust these two outlets because of a wider perception of an unbiased presentation. And it's important to note here that, like all of us really, what we present on social media is an editorialized snapshot. Their websites, radio, and TV presentations are different, with different priorities and methodologies based on delivery systems. But a quick look at the RNZ posts on Facebook over the past 12 hours, well, they show a pro-housing right-wing story, pushing individual responsibility on the best way to wash your clothes, authority figure given position of importance overriding community concerns, straight-up government narratives on fixing the basics on bikes being allowed on footpaths, authority figure Winston says, authority figure Met Service says, individual responsibility on taking charge of health issue, and family responsibility for decisions around child poverty. In fact, the only thing that they had on there that was framed as a community first piece was looking at systemic issues worsened by the government's recently announced policy on move-on orders. On One News, they uncritically platform Winston again on blind ideology, pushed individual responsibility on dealing with financial stress, a story on senior citizens showing individual responsibility by taking steps to make sure other drivers knew that they were senior citizens, Met Service Authority figure, pro-business housing authority figure saying things are great, and individual responsibility on deodorant choices. And don't get me wrong, sometimes the framing makes sense. Massive change in the weather is coming. Get in an authority figure on the weather to talk about it. But the choice of framing is a tool that we can use to spot a bias and the agenda an outlet is presenting to the public. Hell, in a job ad this week, Stuff straight up admitted they set the agenda as a news outlet. For a supposed left-wing or even centrist outlet, though, the fact that they keep straight up platforming comments made by coalition leaders as headlines and clickbait showcase a really specific view that they are giving prominence. In a 12-hour period monitored, neither platformed anything from the opposition parties or framed anything said by the coalition as negative or incorrect. There are, over longer periods of time, some exceptions, like One News pointing out the government's claim of being tough on gangs has seen record numbers of gang recruitments, and there are now more gang members than there are police, which drew an angry response from the government used to having their narratives platformed uncritically. That's very much the exception, not the rule, over the way that media is presented on Facebook in this country. So, how do we make sure that we're kept informed if even our centrist media outlets are presenting information in a way that platforms a right-leaning ideology? Well, find other media outlets is probably a good start, and look at multiple outlets' coverage on the same content. Make sure that you're aware of the framing conventions between left and right. That will help you better decode what to expect in content and news, and do what you can to keep yourself properly informed. And don't rely on Facebook as a news source if you can help it. Maybe go and see if your old Bebo or MySpace accounts are still active instead. Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. While you're here, why not hit that like button or share the video or even subscribe to the channel. You could even become a paid YouTube member so you can see things released in advance, you get access to some exclusive content, and like all these awesome people, you get to have your name at the end of the credits as well.